And welcome back, everyone. And I now welcome representatives from the Australian Logistics Council. So, if you could please give your name and the capacity in which you appear today.
So I'm Kirk Cunningham, I'm the CEO. I'm going to introduce my colleagues. Rachel Smith, our Director of
Policy and Advocacy,
and Kerry Cork, who's been one of the stalwarts of our organisation since 2013 on an advisory basis. So we bring them along for the hard questions.
Tremendous. All right, well, I'll get you now, give you the opportunity to go to an opening statement. Very keen to give you the opportunity to put it all on the record, and then we'll flick to a few questions. But before I do go, Senator McDonald, sorry about that, but I will start with you. So we'll just have the opening statement first.
Terrific. Well, the Australian Logistics Council welcomes the opportunity to present to the committee in relation to its inquiry into a viable, safe, sustainable and efficient road transport industry. As the Chair well understands, the road transport industry is the backbone of freight in Australia, and the consequences of the conversation today impact on every Australian in every community every day. So it's pretty heady stuff. ALC is the peak national body representing major companies participating in the freight and logistics industry, and our policy focus is very simple. It is on delivering enhanced supply chain efficiency and safety. We first filled out our submission, as we were discussing earlier, to the inquiry in November 2019. Much of the world has changed since then, so I'd like to quickly update the committee into the work that we've done since then that's pertinent to your committee. A big piece of work, the ALC has formally published our National Operating Standard, which proposes amendments to the Heavy Vehicle National Law, designed to improve the safe operation of heavy vehicles on Australian roads, and this has been promoted quite widely through our membership and the broader industry. The next Infrastructure and Transport Ministers' meeting to be held later on this year will be considering amendments to the Heavy Vehicle National Law, and it's our hope that the meeting will incorporate the standard into the national law. And if not, to ensure that any changes that are able to be made to the Heavy Vehicle National Law are capable of implementation within 12 months of that meeting, as recommended by the Conrad Review of COAG Councils and Ministerial Reforms. Our view is that the HVNL amendment process has been far too slow. Secondly, ALC has developed a single freight data standard for the National Digital Framework, and one of the reasons the ALC has designed the standard is to allow operators to collect data that can be used to for safety, compliance and planning purposes. And that standard will be formally launched in Melbourne at the end of June this year. To assist the committee, we've provided copies of both standards to the Secretariat, and we look forward to answering your questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Does anyone else wish to make a comment, opening comment? If not, Mr. Cork, you do?
No, I don't.
Oh, no, okay. All right, well, look, let's go to the National Operating Standard for Heavy Vehicle Operators, which came out in January this year. Mr. Cunningham, walk us through this. What exactly is...
So it's 4 sections, I suppose, Chair, starting with a mandatory requirement to gather pertinent data, particularly on the safety side. Secondly, for operators to be able to present a safety management system, and that's scaled to the size of their business. So a small owner-operator, that might be a 2 or 3 page document. A large operator like our members, Linfox and Toll, we would imagine it'd be a much more sophisticated approach. The third piece there is to register where the heavy vehicles are garaged, and the reason for that is to prevent the instance of phoenixing in our industry, where you can close down one day and open up somewhere else the next. So you need to be on an electoral roll to vote for the Senate. We think that you need to have an address for your as part of the operating standard.
Physical address rather than the post office box?
Well, somewhere that's accountable to that single entity. And the final one is to ensure, with some form of mandatory requirement, that everyone operating a heavy vehicle on Australian roads has the financial capacity to make sure that that vehicle is in good shape to be on those roads.
That's right, Senator. The two most important points in a global sense is the importance of attempting to socialise improved safety standards, including in particular understanding the importance of creating and maintaining safety management standards by way of appropriate industry plans, as well as encouraging the use of data so people can keep an eye on how well they're travelling in relation to not only things such as, for instance, hours driven, but also information relating to the truck so it can be properly maintained.
Thanks, Mr. Cook. And look, any body or any association, industry, whatever, even a bunch of subbies out the back of the Broome Derby turn-off having a gathering and making suggestions is always welcome by me how we can improve this industry. May I ask how you got to those 4 standards or those 4 topics or those 4 areas?
So we have a policy committee that our membership, our broader membership, is all represented on that. Obviously, it's a means of prioritisation as well, so that's sort of sieved through a lot of issues in our industry, as you're well aware of those, and that's where we sort of landed with the points of key importance in terms of the heavy vehicle national law for this operating standard. This is quite long-standing policy for us as well. It's been in its genesis, I think, since 2014, 2015. Long-term, long-standing demands of industry to set a national standard.
Yes, Mr. Coningham's quite right. Since 2000, it has been ALC policy since 2011 for the electronic collection of data for use for safety and management purposes. We also increasingly have a very, very active safety committee, which is working very hard to develop sufficient standards for the development of safety management schemes.
And where would that data be kept? Who would have that?
The data would be held by the generator of the data, but we would imagine if, for instance, the heavy vehicle national law was amended appropriately, it would be available for statutory purposes.
Okay, so we've got a big wish, and I think now, help me out, the latest iteration is that the recommendations or the revamped work being done by the group to go to the heavy vehicle, to the TIC meeting in May. I think we got that down there in Melbourne, they were told us, and hoping. So do we know if that body of work's completed? Are you guys on that?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay.
We've been fully involved.
Sorry, there's been a few witnesses in the last few days. Sorry. Yes, Mr. Cork, you did
as best
tell
as
me.
I understand it, the National Transport Commission is bringing together the work of that group. They are presenting that in turn to jurisdictions with the view of having recommendations going to what was to the artist formerly known as TIC, but now the ITMM, the Infrastructure and Transport Ministers Meeting, which is the new handle they give the former TIC in recognition of the fact that COAG has been abolished and the national cabinet system has been
I thought you were going to say I can't give it a tick because they don't do anything.
So you can't give it a tick anymore, no.
Okay, all right. Sorry, it's just very hazy. Okay, I do remember that. Now look, can I just come back? I've got to play the devil's advocate, I do. And I appreciate the role the ALC plays, and I think it's fantastic that tracking companies actually have clients in the room. But you have to forgive me because I also think that the wolf's in the chook house, you know what I mean? Yeah. So let me ask you some tough questions. I've got to go down this path. And I salute and I encourage industry to step forward and say, what do we need to do to lift the standard of our industry? And this is an industry that built my house. And I love this industry, even though I'm not in it every day anymore. And I just watching from the outside. But over the last few years, and I'll get told off if I try and put a number, the standards in the industry, well, let's go back a couple more steps. The transport industry has made some massive productivity improvements. I'll say over the last 30 years, I said 20 and got told off by the ATA. So would we all agree on that?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly, in terms of efficiency, you'd be right. I mean, the modern vehicles coming through, high performance vehicles, far greater capacity, and I think in many ways, the modern fleet is also far greater safety benchmarks for those. So I think as an industry, yes, we've done very well to improve the performance. We spoke last week about rail, and I think rail hasn't done as much as the trucking industry has to improve the efficiency of the system. Yeah.
And where I'm leading to is that, and I won't use my normal terminology because you've all heard it before, but we just keep giving back. We just keep giving back to the clients the opportunity to cart more freight for no money. This is how. I'd like to say I made that term up. I might have shaped it into some of my words, but this is what we're picking up all the way through. So what I'm trying to allude to, being the devil's advocate, by coming up with an operating standard, which you've gone down, and there are important points that you raise, but I just think that every time we put another layer on top of another layer on top of another layer, it all comes down to this industry is so burdened with red tape. This industry is being choked, you know that. I'm not telling you anything I know. And every time we try and introduce something else, the clients at the top of the supply chain, who are also members of yours, so I understand if you can't answer, maybe that I may expect you to, that I respect that, but something's got to give in this industry. And what feedback are you getting from industry when you're talking about adding more layers of stuff that should be done, but we haven't fixed up the backyard yet?
I think that's a really good point, and I'll jump in before, Ray. So in my headspace, I think the ALC's headspace, this is about levelling the playing field. So I think one of the perils of our industry is the ease of entry and people who think you just drive a truck, and we know that's not. Our industry is about deliverers, not drivers, and a whole range of expertise and experience and skills that they bring to it. But we do have the capacity for people to just quickly buy an old truck and jump through the door, undercut the legitimate operators in the performance because there are no set standards. So the operator standards for us are a protection for the industry and protection for the vast majority who are legitimate, high-quality operators in the industry and protect us against the cowboy element. They are also, I think, an added protection for the public that relies on us. When mum's driving down the road towards a heavy vehicle, she has the right to know that driver isn't fatigued, that vehicle is well maintained, that it's operating within reasonable limits of what is required. So we take it from both sides, that both the communities we serve are deserving of the assurances of what the standard this standard delivers, and it also, I think, helps the smaller operators in the industry to be able to say, no, we meet this bottom standard. We always have. I think also, Chair, the idea of telematics is much less problematic today than perhaps it was when we first started talking about it a decade ago. It's much more accessible in terms of cost, and I think it'll be, once there, it will also be welcomed by the smaller operators for this seamless integration with their operating systems, with their tax systems, etc. So I think this could well be a win-win for industry, particularly as it sort of sets that bottom line benchmark of what it needs to come into this industry. Sorry, Rach, is that...
Dismiss.
Thanks, Mr. Conningham, and thanks, Senator. Look, I just want to reiterate Kirk's comments here. As the Director of Policy and Advocacy, I've reached out not only to our members, but some of the smaller operators within the industry, and a lot of the feedback we're getting is that it's common sense and it's stuff that they're already doing. They already have safety management systems. They already, a lot of them use telematics to some degree. So they see this, as Kirk mentioned, a levelling of the playing field for those potentially rogue operators that come in with an older piece of kit and haven't really thought about the broader implications that they have, not only for the industry but also the communities that they're serving.
Sure, and I just want to put my owner-driver hat on here.
Yes. And
as we know, the owner-drivers and the small to medium enterprises are the main movers of freight in this nation, we know that. But what we also do know, I see a lot of this, I'm not arguing with you, but I see a lot is trying to put the genie back in the bottle. So this is where I want to come from, and there are many, many, many fine operators out there employing fantastic people in their business. They treat them as family, but through the squeeze from the top of the supply chain have now been forced down. This is real life, as you know, that they're now finding themselves probably being grouped in the same group as the ones that come in with no idea. And we know how that happens. We have the top of the supply chain, and I say this to a number of companies in the top of the supply chain. They have the best statements you could ever see. And I know that I've been doing some stuff on sham contracting lately. And I know genuinely in their heart they say, thou shalt not engage companies who sham contract. But they're right. They're through. And it just takes a bit of Facebook activity, and all of a sudden someone's got the dirt and the snots on, and then they dob them into me, and then I contact them, and then they go out and clean it up. Good. So when we talk about entry into the industry, my old man said to me in the 70s, it's too easy to get a truck. All you need is a house payment. A mortgage and next month's payment, which was so true. So how do we address that by starting that now? Of all the good people that are already in and who have been squeezed down, and you know how contracts change and the rate goes down and down and down.
And I think that's a perennial issue, and it also goes to the number of drivers, and we know that number is perilously small and rapidly ageing. The skill set required in our industry, I think it's a major challenge to our membership. Certainly, it's of distinct concern to my board. It comes up would come up at least every second board meeting in some form or other. So I think it's a challenge for the industry, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure that there are any simple solutions. But I do think that a national operator standard setting a benchmark requirement that all must follow is going to be part of that solution. And it'd be interesting, I think, to look at what the skill sets and as we talked about earlier, we're talking about deliverers, not drivers, and what are all of the other skill sets that make them competitive and capable in this industry. But it is one of those perennial issues for our industry, and one worthy of further conversation. I don't think we have the answers here today.
Well, look, I do have to throw this to you, as I've done through all the rest of the witnesses through, this is day, 8 or 9 or something of our inquiry, but I would ask, I believe there's low-hanging fruit and there is easy fixes, and I'd be keen to get the ALC's thoughts around this, that we can't put our head in the sand. We can't. Unfortunately, we've run protection. The industry has run protection rackets for the rat bags at the expense of those people trying to do the good thing. So we also know that companies hand down contracts and everything's ticked and it's all done right. And then by the time the freight gets to the DC or to the client's door or wherever it may be, there may be 3 or 4 sets of hands on it. We know that happens. So, and everyone's got their finger in and taken a little bit out. So let's come back to some of the basic stuff. As pathetic as the award rates of pay are, how insulting they are still the national legislated law in this land. And yet we're having drivers that aren't even getting paid that. So then I come to this. So when we take out underpayment of award, kilometre rates that have been absolutely mutilated because they're not getting paid for all the kilometres they pay. When we have on the record witnesses that have said, we go to DCs, and I'm not picking out any DC, we sit in the queue, we have to move the truck every 10 minutes, whoopsie, up another 45, 50 feet, whoopsie, up another 45, 50 feet. We don't go on the clock, because if we go on the clock and say we're getting paid, while we're waiting to get into the DC to get unloaded or loaded, we can't drive our extra hours.
Comes off your hours, yeah.
Yeah, so coming back to where the ALC sits in there, is there topical conversation around this is a real issue and we have to address this from the ALC's point of view? When you say address, start making a lot of noise, and how the heck can you be part of it to fix it? It goes to my low-hanging fruit, Mr. Cottingham.
Yeah. It's obviously we represent the large companies, Linfox, Tolls, etc. And the legitimacy of their employment contracts is obviously something that is of note, I think, and I'm quite certain that they would look at those very carefully. The general behaviours of the industry more broadly, I think, are too slowly, but are starting to be tackled. For example, the Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds, and I'm sure you're aware of that. So sort of the genesis out of Woolworths into its own entity, now really fulsomely supported by the industry. And basically that's coming down to the decent treatment of trucks, drivers, coming into DCs and warehouses. So I think we've got a part of it. I think we're recognising that there is a problem there. I hope also, Mr. Chair, that the scarcity of drivers starts to drive better behaviours in how do you keep your drivers. My son-in-law is a long-haul truck driver, and he is also now, and not yet 30, thinking about where his career prospects are. And he's noticing that his employer, just happens to be Toll, are much more engaged with him, are trying to develop him and keep hold of him as an essential part of their business. And I'm hoping that scarcity will come through as part of that response as well, but much more work to be done.
And look, and I know because I was at the launch of the Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds, and also the evidence taken the other day from Dr. Isles from Monash, which is his survey of 1,134 participants, when he mentioned one in five under 35 are suffering serious mental health issues. But it all goes back, and I don't wish to sound negative, but it all goes back to, I don't know what the mental health issue is there, but what I do know is the strains upon the transport supply chains. And I do know that this is not the boss versus the employer. And the majority of times, we've got that small percentage of the oxygen thieves who give us a bad name. But while there is very little and very poor lack of enforcement here, and I keep saying this, in this nation there is a greater reward to do the wrong thing in road transport, as long as you don't get caught. So I would be keen to see, this is my low-hanging fruit stuff. Stuff that can be done, enforcement, clamp down on the sham contracting, not only Healthy Heads and Trucks and Sheds, for crying out loud, we don't even have enough fit-for-purpose truck bays in this nation in 2021. You want a toilet, you want a shower, and you wonder why we can't get women into the industry. See, all this sort of stuff, it's all part of the supply chain. And I'm not knocking you for the National Operating Standard, I think it's great, but I just think there's so much more to be done before we get there, and I'm very keen to hear.
Senator, if I may, in terms of the truck bays, as you were talking, the ALC has been involved in a pilot program for the National Location Registry, which you may or may not have heard of.
No, I haven't.
That forms part of, I guess, that data piece that we were talking about, and that's identifying where the truck bays are, where the toilet facilities are, where roadhouses are, what facilities are available, and making that readily available to truck drivers to improve the health and well-being of the drivers on their routes.
Thanks, Ms. Smith. So you're part of that, it's a working group?
Working group with the Department of Infrastructure, and that's set to be launched. Indicative date at this stage is the 1st of July, and will form part of our technology summit if it's ready in time.
Okay, it hasn't started yet?
No, but it's in the final stages. And our members, Woolworths is heavily involved in that.
Tell me what it's called again?
The National Location Registry.
National Location. Why can't they just have a National Heavy Vehicle Rest Area Strategy? National Location, what was
Registry.
it?
Because this also extends to warehouses, DCs, etc.
Okay.
And even facilities located at ports and things as well for drivers.
Like toilets or whatever, and food. So when did this first appear? I mean, I know I've been on this for a long time banging on about this, but when was this announced?
So it's pre my time, Senator, I have to say, because I only joined the ALC in August of last year. But I believe that this pilot program has been around, it's been in, I guess, consideration for about 2 years, since late 2018, I believe.
That's correct.
It
It forms part of the response to the National Freight and Supply Chain Strategy, which is being coordinated by the Commonwealth. Perhaps the principal tangible output from that strategy is in fact the National Registry. What we can try to do for you, Senator, is to see what's publicly available for your convenience and send it to the committee.
That would be good, Mr. Cork, thank you. Now, and I appreciate that. Who is on that committee? No, hang on, that National Location Registry? I'm trying not to laugh, sorry.
It's our baby at the start.
Oh, it's yours?
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's been promoted through, my understanding is it came out of the steel industry, the people moving steel around as an idea, and it's been more formulated since then.
Right, so you've taken it up to the government and said you need to do something here. Yeah. So, okay, who's on it?
Senator, can I take that on notice and get you the exact list?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I would appreciate that. And Ms. Smith, so I don't trap you or try and trip you up where I'm going on there.
Oh, no.
And good. and good.
I like it. I like a pointy question.
That's it. Because where I'm going to lead to is one of the things that I'm very critical in this nation is and look, a lot of people come in here with, good at heart, what can we do? They just forget one little tiny bit of the puzzle. They forget to talk to the men and women who've got the steering wheel in their hands. Yeah. So this is why I'd be very, very keen to see how that's progressed. And if you could do that for me, that would be good. Absolutely. So let's go back to also part of one of our into the terms of reference, where I have said very clearly this terms of reference was developed, as you would know, Mr. Cunningham, it was done by industry. It wasn't me, it was industry, and it was fully endorsed in the Transport Industry Standards Forum. And we're off and running, and I'm going to report back to everyone and say here it is. But one of the biggest issues that's come through has been remuneration. And that is not only from truck drivers and owner drivers, but the financial bleed on businesses as well. Not just small to medium enterprises, but also the biggies too that are getting squashed. And part of the conversations are an independent body to oversee that you just can't screw truck drivers and trucking companies. My words. Have you had any conversation around that from the ALC?
I might pass to Mr. Cork.
Mr. Cork? Yep, sure.
Well, Senator, the short answer is that what ALC has focused on, given its charter, are things such as, for instance, the National Operating Standards, which we've discussed, and also the Single Freight Data Standard for the National Digital Framework, which is the second of the two documents we've provided the committee.
Yes,
we should make clear that we are not a registered industrial organisation, and so to the extent that it deals with the ins and outs of industrial relations, our larger members have RTO, of whom I'm sure you're familiar, who deal with those issues. So effectively, that's where the differences of I guess responsibility are. We deal with the tangibles, such as the development of the standards that we've discussed this afternoon. But when it comes to the finer points of industrial relations, between our larger members, of course, as you'd be familiar, having their own registered agreements, and the fact that to the extent that they speak to these issues, there is a registered industry organisation is charged to do that. Our preference is to allow that process to be the way in which these sorts of things are communicated.
And Mr. Cork, I'm very relaxed with that. I'm very happy to hear that. Another body said that to me once in this building too, and then couldn't wait to have their face stuck in the middle to try and tear down what we try and set up to do the right thing that unfortunately didn't do the right thing. So I'm really relaxed because I can look and think the ALC are never going to stick their nose in there.
We're not going to stick our nose into that.
No, that's fine.
I think we were all part of the large meeting of industry next door. I think it was actually, Mr. Chair, when we first started this conversation. I think it was a really worthwhile meeting of minds and a terrific conversation to take forward. My hope is that certainly from our members' side, there is an acute focus now on looking after the scarce resource that is the modern delivery driver, and treating them extremely well so they stay within the industry, and even more than that we can attract younger people to the industry that we absolutely need if we're going to resupply Australia.
Yeah, isn't that a fact? Isn't that a fact? Now, let's. I'd like to give you the opportunity. I don't want to lose you. Every time I look at the clock, is that clock fast? Sorry, because I like to keep going, but okay. Look, let's just talk quickly about. It'd be a shame to bring you all the way here and not talk about your single freight data standard. Tell me what that's all about.
So the Single Freight Data Standard, it came out of a conversation that our members had at a technology summit in 2018, and it identified, I guess, in very simple terms, the need for industry to sing off the same hymn sheet, basically. So a working group was formed, and the Single Freight Data Standard was, I guess, conceptualised and brought about. This has been in partnership with industry, and it's also been in partnership with GS1, which is a global standards organisation. So the standards that are within the Single Freight Data Standard are ISO standards, so we're not reinventing the wheel, we're just taking something that's available internationally and putting it in an Australian context. The other benefit that I guess the membership perceives on behalf of industry of having a Single Freight Data Standard is not only is industry singing from the same hymn sheet. It can be brought up to, I guess, a government level for planning purposes. So making, I guess, data-driven decisions for the industry, because everyone's speaking apples and apples, not apples and oranges.
So I'm sorry, it's just, I've got that glazed look again. All right, but what actually is it?
So basically it's a set of
I'm
standards.
trying not to look at it while I'm listening to you.
Oh, that's
Sorry,
okay.
brother.
So, Senator, it's a set of standards that track and trace freight through the supply chain, and it can be used it's mode agnostic, so it can be any form of freight within the supply chain, but areas where we have looked at applying it, for example, is in the National Location Registry, so that could be all the data that's collected in, I guess, from all those different locations where all those facilities are brought up into the registry and, I guess, communicated to truck drivers when they need rest stops or whatever it is. So rather than each site having their own data all their data language that they collect at each site, it's all in the one language, which means that it can all be collected into a centralised point and disseminated to those that need it.
The important thing, Senator, is it does two things. First of all, it is designed to allow conveniently the capacity to discharge regulatory obligations, like, for instance, speed and fatigue and all those sorts of things.
Right.
And the second is, frankly, where's my kit?
Yeah.
So where's my goods? We are hoping that increasingly will be used, as Ms Smith has said, as the universal method by which the freight chain transfers information. We are at very much the very first stage, and as Ms Smith has said, we are launching it in late June in Melbourne, and we hope that it is picked up in such a way that ultimately it can form the backbone of what is known as the freight hub. And I'm sure I don't know whether you've
The freight hub?
The freight hub. Have you heard of the freight hub? Yeah. National Freight Data Hub.
Yes, I have.
You have, yeah.
Sorry.
So what we're hoping is that the language that Ms Smith has outlined is used as the framework for that, so that there can be interchangeability of information that not only helps, obviously, commercial outcomes, but even helps with safety. And that's the reason we're promoting it.
What's the cost of that rollout?
Well, the cost of the rollout... Well,
the cost of this technology, sorry. Or this data, sorry.
It's sort of more of a question for our generation, the contest between VHS and beta and deciding early.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah. So rather than sort of letting beta and VHS go and compete...
You know, your kids will say, what is VHS and beta?
That's it. What's a video? Yeah. I've had mine say, what's a fax? And then the other one said, what's a printer? So I'm getting really confused. But it's more of a decision as to what language we're going to use moving forward. So all of our members can come together and decide, okay, we'll focus in on this. So really it's not a dollar-driven thing, it's an ALC-driven thing. Is let's set the standard. We keep calling for mandatory data. Well, let's set a standard on what language we're going to use to gather that up. Yeah.
All right, now my last one, let me go down this path too. When we talk about getting into the easy entry, what would that look like if you were able to pull the levers of government and say you're not allowed to buy a truck unless you've got what? How would you do that?
Well, the national, the standard that we've recommended, we think that should be part of the heavy vehicle national law. So that's if you can't put together a safety management system, again, scale to your business, if you can't communicate what you're doing with safety, there doesn't need to be a cost, but it needs to be a bit of an effort to be able to do just that. So when we talk about the safety management system...
Sorry, Mr. Conley, I'll just come in. So you're not saying someone should be able to count to 10 and actually know the difference between outgoings and incomings? No.
So what we're saying is that person should understand what the master code requires of them, what the public's expectation of them. I would like to think that it would also have a bit of that, this is the vehicle, this is the route, this is the load, this is the client, and these are all part of that broader safety conversation as well. But a lot of these are not cost measures, and a lot of these will be very simple for reputable operators in the industry already. They'll be more difficult for someone coming in who's trying to pretend that they're a trucking company. So I think that just the standard itself will actually be and should be welcomed by the operators in the industry right now, because the ease with which they can be compliant is almost there already. Whereas it's much more difficult for a new person to come into the industry. It's not difficult, but at least they're going to have to be held to a standard that everyone else is already
But can
held
I
to.
be cynical and say someone can go to someone and go, here mate, I'll give you $100, write me up an SMS?
Well, and that has happened before. That's an issue certainly in the construction industry as well. And what a part of the solution to that is how well the Heavy Vehicle National Regulator manages that process. But I think we'll go for 85% imperfect than 100% perfect today to get to that, just to have that thought process and that basic capacity to get it down, I think is a really important part.
Mr. Conningham's right. I mean, it's a two-step play. Our first
He's
step...
not allowed to say I'm wrong, by the way.
That's right. I would never say my leader is wrong ever.
He knows you're leaving too.
But no, it's a two-step play. The first is to get socialised the fact that it's a good idea to document your safety practices. That's the first step. Once that's socialised, we can then move to the next step, which is to have appropriate entities such as auditors or regulators to say, well, okay, you have this safety management scheme documented. That's great. Now, tell me what precisely are the practices that you adopt to give effect to these outcomes. Now, surely you should be able to show me that. That is the second act in the two-act play. We're not there yet, and that's the reason why we've published the standards that we're discussing. The other point we think that is relevant is much like the circumstance in New South Wales with respect to passenger buses. We are expecting that there is some capacity for an operator to display that there is the capital available to him to ensure that the capital is there to maintain a vehicle in a safe manner. Now, that's about the best we can do in our position, and that's why we hope that the ITMM, the son of TIC, look favourably upon the adoption of the National Operating Standard when they meet in May. Okay,
and I'll leave it on this comment, and I reckon all your clients and the majority of trucking enterprises and companies they use would just be walking apart the SMS. But I think they'll fail the first spot when they're at the DCs or at the steel yards or wherever they may be, or at the ports, not getting paid while they're loading and unloading.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Basics. Got a lovely roof, we just got to make sure we've got some walls to hold it up. Can I thank you, Mr. Conningham, very much? I'm sorry, I do have to get moving. Ms. Smith, good to see you again. Mr. Cork, good to see you. Safe travels.
And thank you very much for the work of the committee on this really important issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now call our next witnesses, Safe Work Australia. Are they teleconferencing or they're coming in? Oh, they're coming in. Okay, even better.